The first type of conditioning that we are going to learn is classical conditioning. And as usual, we are going to look at the learning objective. But this time, I want you to repeat after me. Are you ready? Okay. You'll be able to explain how people can acquire involuntary responses. Are you repeating after me? Through classical conditioning, and how you might help students overcome classically conditioned emotional responses that interfere with their learning. This time, I want you to read aloud with me, okay? You'll be able to explain how people can acquire involuntary responses through classical conditioning and how you might help students overcome classically conditioned emotional responses that interfere with their learning. One last time, I want you to read the learning objective by yourself. I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds. So I'm trying to use some tactics that are based on behaviorism because behaviorist psychologists think that repeating something can help one's learning because as they argued, learning is changes in behavior, and repeating something like repetition or practice, they usually can lead to some changes in behavior. All right, thanks for bearing with me. All right, then what is classical conditioning? So when an involuntary response that is normally elicited only by a given stimulus can be evoked by an unrelated stimulus after a period when the two stimuli are presented together repeatedly. So this definition may be a little like cumbersome, and it can be better understood with the example. So have you heard about the psychologist named Pavlov, Ian Pavlov? So he did an experiment with a dog. So food. As behaviorist says, um, human do not learn differently from the animals, right? So what do you guys do when I mean it's kind of a weird questions, but what happens to your tongue when you look at a really savory, like delicious food? Like you salivate, and so does dog, right? So food is unconditioned stimulus in that it leads unconditioned response, which is salivation. How about the bell? If someone rings the bell, what happens to you? I mean, to be more specific, what happens to your tongue? Nothing happens, right? Because bell is a neutral stimulus. So bell shouldn't um, make dogs salivate. However, if the stimulus of bell and stimulus of food are associated and they are given to the dog uh, at the same time, then the dog will salivate because food is unconditioned stimulus. And imagine that this has been repeated like 50 times or 100 times. Now the dog has associated food, which is unconditioned stimulus, in a different way. So now the dog associated the bell, which is a neutral stimulus, with a unconditioned stimulus, which is food, with that automatically makes them salivate. So after being conditioned, bell becomes a conditioned stimulus. So now when the dog hears the bell sound, they become to salivate because now it is conditioned with the food. Another example that is illustrated in the textbook is baseball. And I think I can elaborate on the baseball example well because I was a member of a baseball club and had a little bit of traumatic experience. So what do you like? How do you guys feel when you're hit by a baseball? Like, have you hit by a baseball? It really hurts, especially if it was thrown by a good pitcher. I like baseball. To be more specific, I liked watching baseball, but I thought that I would be good at baseball, but it was my fault. It was my mistake. So I was apparently not a good baseball player. So during the baseball training, I was hit by balls many times, and it was really hurt. And my baseball coach, so in this example, baseball, being hit by a baseball is like an unconditioned stimulus, which made me flinch or which made me cry, which made me feel pain, right? Which led to this kind of unconditioned response. Um, and the and my baseball coach, they kind of wanted to make the practice atmosphere more like more friendly, more comfortable. So he played some of his favorite songs, which are neutral stimulus, right? People usually do not feel pain or anxiety when they listen to music. Unfortunately, and sad enough, I was hit by ball many times while listening to that music during the training. So after like eventually like I decided to run out of that baseball club, but I was being conditioned, and even now I do not listen to the songs that my coach used to play. I really I don't know, like I really do not like that these songs. So obviously that was another example of classical conditioning. So I'll just repeat the process of classical conditioning. Not that it's super important, but many of students find it a little confusing. So certain stimulus elicits reflexive response. So they are unconditioned response because these responses are innate and learned. So we do not actually learn to salivate or learn to flinch when we eat food or when we are hit by baseball, right? This is something that we naturally, unconditionally do. And the stimulus that lead to these kind of unconditioned response that cause this kind of unconditioned response called unconditioned stimulus. So for instance, if someone puffs air to your eyes, what do? You blink your eyes, right? So these are the examples of unconditioned response and unconditioned stimulus. Over time, an unrelated neutral stimulus may be paired with UCS. So a gong sounds. I know this is not a very authentic example, but like if when a gong sounds at the same time as air puff, then this neutral stimulus, which is a gong sound, which shouldn't make you blink your eyes, becomes associated with unconditioned stimulus, which is air puff. Now, the response now after this neutral response, neutral stimulus becomes conditioned stimulus, you just automatically blink your eyes when just hearing the noise of the gong. Right, then I mean, if it's still difficult, classical conditioning isn't a difficult concept. Let's think about other examples of classical conditioning in our everyday lives. So, like, let's say that you are dating with significant others. What do you guys do when you're dating, right? You're going to a nice restaurant, you're going to a good dessert cafe. What do these like good food and good dessert do? Right? Make you feel happy, right? So you guys usually when people are dating, they usually do the activities that give them pleasure, that give them like some like pleasant and positive unconditioned response. So when dating, it's really important to associate yourself with positive stimuli. Like let's imagine whenever you meet someone, bad things happen. Like you feel pain, you feel anxious, you feel anger, the food is bad, the dessert after having the dessert together on date, like you become to have diarrhea. So and then that can make if these things happen very many times, the other partner, the partner can be associated with negative, some kind of negative unconditioned stimuli, then the result of the dating would be quite bad, negative, right? You might you may end up breaking up with each other. So we actually use classical conditioning when we are dating. Another example is advertisement. Companies use a lot of famous celebrities because these celebrities are kind of unconditionally have people feel like positive emotions or like develop like positive feelings toward their products. So although water itself is although it's essential, like we cannot survive water, but water is something that does not usually cause positive emotion, right? But by associating the product of this water with this famous actress, the company tries to make these associations. So whenever they see the product of this product of water, they would think about this beautiful actress, and they would think that, oh, like I want to have that product. I want to like drink that water. And how many of you are afraid of going to the hospital? I'm still like, I don't know, like when I pass by, I don't feel like I feel very comfortable. So again, another example is that like hospital itself sh should be a neutral response because hospital itself doesn't do anything. However, what we experience in hospital, whether it was surgery, whether it was getting like immunization vaccine or COVID vaccine, like this kind of medical practices make you sometimes feel painful, right? So at this age, these experiences have become like associated enough that just like the image of hospital makes one feel uncomfortable or not very happy. One last example of is cockroaches. So cockroaches themselves are small insects that do not cause any harm. But so in my case, I think I cannot even put the picture of cockroaches because I really do not like them, and that makes me feel like nauseous. And I think it's not because of the cockroaches themselves, but my mother's being freaked out and surprised and screaming. As a child, mother screaming and freaking out is an unconditioned stimulus that leads to unconditioned response of like fear and like anxiety, right? But whenever cockroaches occurred at our apartment, my mom freaked out and screamed and like she went crazy. And I think that's where I developed an extreme fear toward this tiny little poor insect. So anyway, these are all examples how classical conditioning occur and may influence our everyday lives. There are some other common phenomena that you should be aware as a teacher in classical conditioning. So generalization, it means responding to similar stimuli in the same way to a conditioned stimulus. So for instance, let's say that you like math teacher, then you come to like science teacher, and you come to like the whole faculty and the whole school. So you are slowly generalizing the generalizing your response to the similar stimuli, like this in a positive way. Of course, the direction can be negative. Like you hate one teacher, like math teacher, for instance, and that math teacher, I don't know, it's close to another like science teacher, and you become to hate that science teacher as well, and you become to the science teacher is close to other faculty, and you become to hate the whole faculty, which is like a sad story, and this shouldn't happen. Um, but this is the concept of generalization. Another concept is extinction, and extinction happens when conditioned response gradually disappears in the absence of the unconditioned stimulus. One salient example of classical conditioning that usually has some negative influence on students is test anxiety. Some of the students have enormous amount of fear because they have so test in principle should be neutral stimulus because test itself doesn't do anything, but because some students have too many failure experiences or too many bad experiences when taking the quiz, that that the quiz is associated with unconditioned stimulus, and quiz becomes a conditioned stimulus that leads them to feel nauseous, feel sick, whenever the quiz approaches or whenever the exam approaches. But teachers can extinguish a student's undesirable response to a given stimulus by introducing the stimulus slowly and gradually, especially when a student is happy, relaxed, and feeling good. For instance, for students who have extreme fear of tests, teachers can give some kind of small, more lower risk, low stake formative assessment so that students can feel that, oh, maybe not all types of tests are negative. And when these students become more familiar with these small tests, maybe teachers can provide a little bit more challenging or like higher risk task, but with the opportunities for students to resubmit the answer. So by exposing the students to to different types of tests at a different level of anxiety, teachers can help extinguish students' undesirable fear or anxiety toward the test. And now that you learned the concept of classical conditioning, I want you to write what would be the educational implications of classical conditioning.